So it's good to have you guys here today. It's important for us to keep this conversation going. I know that we've been talking for a little while now and talking about how we're all managing through this time that's been quite challenging. And I wanted to talk a little bit more in specifics. The other episodes or videos that we've done, we've talked about in general how the population is doing and given some ideas of what we could be doing. But today I really wanted to hear from you, Mike, talk a little bit about the adolescent population, because you spend a lot of your time with adolescents.
Both at home and in work.
So tell us a little bit about what you've been experiencing with the adolescents and how they're managing nowadays.
I think the biggest surprise for me initially was that I underestimated how important being in the same room was together.
Really?
So, living in the age we live in, and they're much better at this than us old people are. They're always on their phone, FaceTiming, stuff like that, but it seems to not translate to therapy, which I found fascinating and frustrating at the same time, right? I guess, because I just thought it would be quite the easy transition. But what I'm noticing is that the physical space of, being together and that being kind of removed from the picture has made more of an impact than I initially assumed.
Really? What are some of the things that they're saying about this whole transition? Because I would have assumed the exact same thing. I would have thought that the adolescent population are always on their phone. They're always on their devices.
And this will be great.
Yeah. This would be great, right?
It's awesome. Yeah.
Doing this is...
they would have been like, why didn't you do this a long time ago?
Right. Yeah, well, I guess, what I'm hearing them say is they prefer to be in person. So even with evaluations, I've had a couple people who, were excited about doing this and then changed their mind because they realized that we're not, physically in the same room, which again was shocking. So I think they just want to be around other people. As you guys probably talked about earlier, this creates a lot of isolation by default. So for a lot of them, I think just continuing that isolation, even though we're not really isolated, we're together, but it still kind of feels that you're by yourself. And essentially you are, when we're doing group, because you have to be in a private space and everything's confidential, as you know, so you're still kind of by yourself, even though you're with other people at the same time. So I think it forced me, again, to change my perspective of what my assumptions were, which I feel like a hypocrite because we're constantly saying, don't assume.
Right.
So it was nice for me, though, to get that feedback from them, just to kind of see, how it was different, even though I might assume, like I said, that it was the same, if that makes sense.
Outside of just the population of adolescents that are in treatment that you're seeing, I think, about some of the adolescents that I talk to in my neighborhood or see, or like through neighbors and stuff like that. I don't know about you guys, but I know some parents are like saying, yeah, it's okay if they have one or two friends over, right? Then other parents are saying, no, can't have any of that.
Right.
Some are saying, okay, if you're out in the front yard or on the deck or something like that.
6 feet apart.
Others are like, no, right? So it's created a lot of difficult times in families, and it's created a lot of difficult times in friendships. And as we all know, especially with adolescents, their friends are everything, right? Like that's really important to stay connected.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, how do you think this is all impacting adolescents and their connection to friends and being social and being able to get out of the house and do things? Are you guys hearing anything or seeing anything that kind of would be helpful to share?
I just tell them to make it a point to stay connected, right? So that you don't want the days to go by, where you're not talking to anyone, right? I said, take advantage of the technology. I said that I tell them all the time I feel lucky because I'm old enough to remember what things were like before all the wonderful things we had, like iPhones and stuff, right. But also young enough still to know how to use it, not like my mom where the buttons have to be this big. I love you, Mom. So I said, if you have all these tools, right, not using them right, is a
Doesn't
kind
make
of a
sense.
mistake, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't fit with what we're trying to do, especially when you talk about the impact on mental health, right? We know that isolation kind of comes standard with the package when you're depressed or anxious and things like that. So if you have these tools, use them. But I think overall it blends itself into the problem with motivation in general. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've seen that has really impacted the population I work with of adolescents is the motivation is, way down.
Yeah.
Right? So getting them to do anything, even getting out of bed, So again,
So hard.
well, it's nice to have something you can point at yourself and still be in group,
Yeah.
but it also gives you an excuse to kind of stay, in bed basically, because you can get away with that. When you come to, here or anywhere for therapy, pre-coronavirus, right?
Yeah.
It forced you to leave your house, get out of bed.
It's like accountability,
Yeah,
right?
get
like
dressed.
Somewhere that you had to be or something you had to see, and you don't really get that right now. So
Right.
then there's no reason to get out of bed, or there's no reason to keep up with the schedule or do the things. And kind of like we talked about in our last clips that, we don't have any, I don't know, like if we can't do it the way that we used to do it, then there's no way to do it. And then
Right.
that's what we,
That either or.
yeah, and then we just hone in on that, and then that's where we stay. I think that's maybe what we're seeing a lot is
Definitely.
that's where they are. So.
And that goes with what you were saying, Lou. It cuts off the connection, and that's how it impacts, staying connected to your friends or the people that you care about. Is because if you, and I like what you said, Rachel, about if it's not this way, and I'm seeing that a lot as well as very black and white kind of thinking, which of course also comes standard with the package.
Yeah.
But it's like it's not the same, right? I can't hang out with these people, so I don't like that, so I'll just go to nothing.
Yeah.
This void. So it's like fill the void, right? Talk to them. You still can talk to them. You can see their face. That's a great thing.
It's a great thing.
I wish I could, when I was 16, I could see
Yeah.
my friend's face or my girlfriend's face. And brings me to another quick point about, some of them, if not a lot of them, are also in, romantic relationships. And, again, not having that physical presence there has been difficult for them as well, where they're afraid of how it will impact those relationships because they can't see each other. But I've also seen really cool stuff where some of their partners have sent them care packages and stuff like that. So again, it's thinking outside of the box and being creative and using what you have rather than focusing on the things that you don't have.
It's funny, you mentioned care packages. One of our neighbors has younger kids, and she's in a group with other parents, and each week somebody takes a separate turn coming up with a care package for kids. And so they'll go to each other's houses and drop off that care package
That's awesome.
for the kids to play with that week, right? And it's giving them something else to do. But I thought that's an awesome idea.
Great idea.
And what else are you going to do that? I think that's the spin we have to kind of put on it, is because this is such uncharted territory. It's like, okay, well, this is where we are now. So how can we make the best of this now? And in ways that we maybe would have never had to or wanted to before, like I would never, I've done care packages before, but now it's like, it has a whole other meaning, I think, like to care package, it's just an extra surprise to the day when there's not really much else going on, perceivably. So have you noticed like at home for you, because I know you have kids, so it's like kind of like, how is that working at home, and then also seeing it firsthand too?
I think my daughter, she really misses, that connection. So I see it in her too, which is interesting because she's younger. She's more towards the middle school age, but she's struggling with, I want to physically see my friends.
Yeah.
She already does the FaceTime stuff. She, has a cousin she's really close to, and they do that regularly anyway.
Yeah.
But, again, she's more of she likes to be active. She does gymnastics, things like that. And that has all been completely taken away through this. And it's hard to explain to an 11-year-old, right? And my joke has been, I have no previous pandemic to compare this to. I can't say, remember, 4 years ago when we had that pandemic.
Yes, exactly.
It's fine.
Yeah, this is all new. So when you're a parent, they look to you for that guidance, and sometimes it's a lot of pressure to provide that guidance because I don't have the answers, right? We're figuring this out together as we go along. So, but I try to follow the same advice and impart that upon her as well, that we can focus on how bad this is, and all the things that we don't have, or we can focus on the things that this gives us.
Definitely.
You know, so we try to do different things that keep her active so that she's not kind of stuck. And focused on I can't do this, I can't do that. Different things. I think one of the things that I've enjoyed is there's always stuff that in our lives where we say, I don't have time to do that, right? Or or things that we just want to do, but we keep putting it off and putting it off. So I think for me, I've challenged myself. I'm going to do those things, and that's been kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, and I tried to say that to my daughter as well, is why don't you do some of those things that you always say you don't have time to do?
I think that's really hard to motivate. You mentioned motivation earlier. I don't want to single out adolescents, but
too late.
Adolescents are very tough to motivate at times, right? And I know parents struggle with that, especially nowadays, that they're struggling to make sure that they're doing their homework. How much do I get involved? As well as giving them something else to do other than look at a screen. I was talking to somebody else who was describing, like, after a certain period of time of looking at those screens, they kind of just go, like, there's this, there's a shutdown, like they're just not there, not present, and it's really hard. What's that?
It affects the brain.
Absolutely,
Studies,
right? Yeah. And I think that also adds to that lack of motivation. But at the same time, I'm talking with parents who are saying, like, what else can I expect of them to do? Like, we've often tried not to, try to limit their screen time. Oftentimes parents are trying to do that, but now it's like, go watch the movie, or just go play on that thing for a little bit longer. And we have to allow that. I wonder, what advice do we have for parents? Because I know a lot of times parents feel guilty about that. They feel conflicted about that. Always there's this divide, not always. A lot of times there's this divide between how we parent. I do it this way, you do it that way. And of course, kids are going to go to the one that does it the way they want. So I'm imagining that there's probably a lot more of that going on in families. Like, how are we helping parents? What suggestions do we have for parents right now who are struggling with that kind of stuff?
I mean, I'd say giving yourself grace, first of all, because you can't do it all. I mean, there's, I think, this stigma around that you should be able to do it all for whatever reason, especially with all the spare time that apparently we have. But I think, at least for me, that was my thing. At the first couple weeks of this, I was like, oh my gosh, I have all this time left from, like, not having to commute, and I don't have to, pack my lunch, and everything's just so convenient. But like, we don't really have that much time. I mean, if we're still working from home and we're still trying to, caretake for kids and things like that, you don't really have all this extra time, especially when you have kids home. So you have kids and you're trying to work at the same time. It's not possible. And so whoever said it was, I don't know. I don't know where that came from, or I don't know, but I think we stick on it a lot. So giving yourself some grace during this time and some compassion that we're all trying to figure it out, and what's the task at hand right now.
Great.
And just trying to kind of hone in on that, I think. I do that personally, but I would probably recommend that for anybody, especially parents right now. But what have you been seeing?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short because this is a great subject. It comes up even prior to all of this. I think the number one mistake that I see parents make that I tell them is they try to do too much, right? Now, again, that comes from a place of good intention, because if you love someone or you care about someone, you want them to feel better, you want them to succeed, all of it. But there's a line, right? And if you don't see the line, right, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because then you're doing too much, and you're doing more for, to probably send them in a direction that's more difficult for them to feel motivated. If you're constantly pulling them, you have to surrender sometimes to that you don't have 100% control, or really any control, to be honest, of what they do. You can influence, but can't control it. So I think the other advice I give is the concept of space. So yes, we're social, and that's important, but you also have to know when to give them space. Asking them if they're okay 14 times in a row doesn't mean you're going to get the answer that you think is going to come out. They have to be able to get there on their own, and that's hard because you have to be patient, to get there. So I think it's it's a cliche to say this, but it's a balance, right? It's, yes, we should be doing things together, but also, yeah, you know what? You can go do your thing for an hour or two.
Mhm.
You know, I think if it's 12 hours later and they're still in their room, like, sure, I mean, please check on them periodically.
Yeah.
But, to me, if you're that worried about your kid, right, that you feel like you have to check on them, every 15 seconds, then we start getting into questions about level of care, right?
Yeah.
So if and some people need that, type of environment where they need to be watched and supported in that way. But I think a lot of times we assume people need that because we're worried, right? It's coming from us, right? And I think when you give advice to people, I think it's hard because I've said this a lot and they haven't disagreed with me, the kids, that I think a lot of time when you're trying to make someone feel better, you're really trying to make yourself feel better.
Oh, absolutely. Right?
So the
That's
stuff
It's my anxiety. That's why I'm asking.
yeah, the
all
stuff
that.
that you say probably works for you, but maybe not so much for the person that you're talking to.
Yeah.
Again, coming from a really good place,
Absolutely.
but you have to really, I think that we're trained to do this, right? We went to school for this in theory, that we're trained to not think like ourselves. So if I'm sitting across from you or you, my job is to figure out, how do you think about this?
Right.
How do you do the things you do? If you could just bring a little bit of that to anything in your life, really, but in this case,
Really?
parenting, you're probably going to just automatically be a better, parent, and you don't have to take out student loans and go to grad school to do it, which is
Right.
kind of nice.
Yeah,
I mean,
right?
Yeah, I'll take that deal.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think you brought up a good point, intention versus execution. My intention is pure and I, have very good intention to take care of my child or whatever it might be, but the way we're executing it, if we're not checking in to see, is this actually effective? Am I actually achieving the outcome that I'm hoping for? If we're never examining that, then we don't know. And then we're putting all of our effort into this thing that takes energy that's going nowhere.
Yeah.
And then we feel overworked and we
feel
wonder why.
frustrated.
Yeah, and we kind of, like you said, things that we can't control. If we put so much energy into things we don't control, you're not going to see a shift in outcome, and therefore we're just going to be spinning our wheels and have no energy, which is what we all wish we had, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, that was a really good point.
Yeah.
Any other things that might be helpful at this point that adolescents can take away from our conversation, parents can take away, that any other things that you guys want to share with them that might be helpful for them to hear?
In general, one of the subjects that's been coming up a lot, during this time, but it's just being, comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yes, that's cliche. But I think that, the concept of feeling better, we conceptualize that a certain way, that it has to look like this. And I think that when you're talking about a lot of the things that we're dealing with in this field, better means different. It's defined differently, by person to person. Feeling better to me probably means the absence of, stress or this or that. I can afford to have that though, as a goal right now, right? Because I don't have this extra layer of, whatever that I can't control. We don't ask for depression or anxiety, right? We don't buy it in the store. It happens, right? So I think that changes things, and we have to be realistic about what feeling better looks like. And then also related to that, getting comfortable that when I'm changing something, and this is universal, by the way, this has nothing to do with mental health.
Right.
Change is hard. That's why we have jobs. I say it all the time. I will always have a job because we suck at change.
Yeah,
People
it's so
do.
hard.
So I think that, again, you have to be realistic about, this isn't supposed to necessarily feel good 5 seconds after I try it. So
Right.
getting out of bed, forcing yourself to be motivated to do something that you want to do, that's not necessarily going to feel the way that it's advertised, right?
Yeah, good
Or
point.
that we want it to feel. Like, oh, this feels amazing. I got out of bed today. No, you still might feel like crap. But can you push through that? Because like anything in life, the more you do it, the easier it becomes eventually. And that's the key word, is eventually. Not
Don't know
immediately.
when that will be.
Yeah.
Right.
But we know it's not the first time you do it, and we know it's not 7 years later. There's somewhere in between there that you'll get there. And hopefully it's closer to the one time than the 7 years, but we got to keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
That's part of routine. That's the importance of doing something on a regular basis so that it becomes comfortable.
Yeah, the analogy I use, because I play guitar, is, a lot of people don't continue with an instrument because they can't get through what I call the I suck phase,
Yeah.
where they're playing and they know what it should sound like, but it's not what it is yet.
Yeah.
So you get really frustrated, and it's very easy just to stop, like anything in life, right? So you see that, with my clients or adolescents, adults, it doesn't matter, where it's like, this doesn't feel the way I want it to feel, or doesn't look the way I want it to look, so I should just stop.
Yeah.
Right? And then again, the motivation goes way down, and then it just gets harder to do that. But what I tell people, and I know from experience, is when there's that moment when it starts clicking, right? You can't buy that. Like there's nothing in life that will replace that feeling, and that's what drives the motivation.
Yeah.
But you got to get there, right? So when you can finally start playing the guitar and the song sounds the way that it's supposed to sound, and your fingers start doing what they're supposed to do, you're in. You're hooked for life. It's really hard
That's
to
a
quit
beautiful
after
thing.
that. Yeah, it is a beautiful thing. It
Man,
helps.
once you get there.
Yeah, but you got to get there.
Yeah.
Right?
Which means you got to keep trying.
Yeah.
So maybe even just creating a new relationship with discomfort is usually like the thing I push for with people, is that when we associate to discomfort as a bad thing that we just have to stop, that's when you will. But if we can change what the relationship with discomfort is, knowing that this is actually just the hump till we're about to be like right where we want to be, and kind of changing that expectation, I think, and knowing what you just said is kind of the key, I think, and trusting that that's the reality. So for everybody.
Definitely.
So
Great points, guys. Well, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you being on, and we'll do this again.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks.